Recently, COD Mobile dropped a new basic in-game setting called Sync ADS FOV to Scope Zoom, and most people are pretty confused by exactly what this does, which makes sense. It's pretty complicated. It's so complicated, in fact, that I spent this entire last weekend just studying the game and studying this setting and FOV inside of the game, as well as obviously sensitivity. And inside of this video, I'm basically going to share with you guys all of my findings as well as my advice. So if you watch this video all the way through, by the end of it, you will have the exact same understanding that I have, and you'll also be able to decide whether or not you should use this setting yourself. And outside of that, you'll also just develop a better understanding of FOV and sensitivity in general, which are two very, very important aspects of especially shooter games and obviously COD Mobile. So what does the Sync FOV setting actually do? To understand that though, first I'll have to explain what FOV is inside of COD Mobile. FOV stands for field of view. It's basically how zoomed in or zoomed out your perspective is. It's the same thing as zooming in or out with a camera. A tighter FOV means you're more zoomed in, and a wider FOV means you're more zoomed out. In Call of Duty Mobile, you're able to adjust your camera FOV from 51 to 90. Basically what these numbers are is the degree of vertical vision you have when you're not aiming down sight. So at 51 FOV, you have 51 degrees of vertical vision, and at 90 FOV, obviously you have 90 degrees of vertical vision. Your horizontal field of view will depend on your device's aspect ratio. So phones are typically more widescreen, so they will have more horizontal field of view, and then tablets will typically have a more square aspect ratio, meaning their horizontal field of view will not be as wide. But again, it doesn't matter your device size or aspect ratio or whatever. If you have the same camera FOV setting, your vertical field of view will be the same across all devices. So that's your standard field of view. Again, you could also call it your hipfire field of view. But what about your ADS FOV? And again, specifically, this is with the Sync FOV setting off right now. So obviously when you do ADS, your field of view does narrow, and this obviously allows you to see your target more clearly, but at the sacrifice of vision on the sides, your peripheral vision. Each type of scope or sight has a fixed vertical FOV value in degrees. It doesn't matter what your device is or what camera FOV setting you're on. If you ADS with a specific sight, there is a fixed FOV that you will have in degrees. And measuring what this field of view is can get very tricky. That's why I spent, again, a lot of the weekend just measuring FOV values for different optics using a really handy tool that I found online that I will link down below. But here was my findings for FOVs across different weapon types or weapon optic types. So these FOVs are actually in different groups. So the first group is shotguns, SMGs, and the Shorty specifically. Shorty is a pistol, but it's also a shotgun. I don't know, but it basically is grouped in again with SMGs and shotguns. With those weapons, iron sights specifically, if you put a red dot on it, then it'll have the red dot FOV, which we'll talk about soon. But the iron sights of these weapons have a vertical FOV of 39.68 degrees. Obviously, I won't read you guys the rest because that'd be tedious, but I do want to point out that the 6X Tactical is actually a tighter FOV than the Sniper. So if you want the most zoomed in optic possible, it would be the 6X. And one more time, just to repeat it because this is important, this is going to be the amount of degrees that you're seeing when you are using these optics without the setting on. Now, something that I need to note really quickly is that there's different sensitivity sliders, obviously, when you are adjusting your sensitivities, but despite some optics having different FOVs, they actually share the same slider. So an example of this is all weapons iron sights actually use the ADS sensitivity slider, but obviously different classes of weapons have different FOVs. Like earlier I said, you know, the shotgun and SMGs are actually wider FOV than ARs and marksmans and pistols, even though once again, they're all grouped under the exact same sensitivity slider, which is not a huge problem because all of their zooms are pretty similar. But in a perfect world, you should have different sensitivities for different levels of zoom. But let me go ahead and show you which sensitivity slider affects what, because this is obviously important if you want to affect your sensitivity. It's good to know what you're actually adjusting. So first is standard. Obviously, this is your hipfire sensitivity. Just when you're not aiming down, it's just the broad one. Doesn't matter what weapon you're holding. This is your basic sensitivity. Next up is going to be ADS. ADS includes iron sight ADS for any weapon, including the swordfish, which is actually not good because the swordfish zooms in as much as a tactical scope. So that's actually really bad. And then also the EM2, which EM2 doesn't zoom in any different than any other iron sight, but it does have like a weird optic on it. But still, again, this is grouped in with the ADS sensitivity. Red dot and hollow is obvious. It's just the red dot and the hollow. hollow, doesn't matter what kind of weapon it's on. If you have this optic, that will be that sensitivity. Tactical scope is just tactical scope. Sniper scope is just the base sniper scope. 3x is 3x. 4x is actually the 4x and the 4.4x, so that's something to keep in mind. And then 6x is 6x, and then 8x. There's no 8x in multiplayer, so I don't even know why that's there. And these are obviously the same for your firing sensitivities as well as your camera sensitivities, so just make sure they're the exact same unless you have a very specific reason to make them different. Okay, so one more thing about the sensitivity sliders that's really important to understand. Basically, the sensitivity sliders don't correlate to each other. To show what I mean, I basically set all my sensitivities up so that no matter what I do in the game, I will have the exact same centimeters per 360 degrees. So what I mean by that is if I drag my finger from one end of my device to the other, which in my case is 23 centimeters, I will rotate 360 degrees. Now, it doesn't matter if I ADS with a red dot, I ADS with a sniper scope. Basically, if I set my sensitivities like this on my own device, which obviously don't copy this is just for me to show you an example. When I have these sensitivities set up this way, my sensitivity will be the exact same rotation no matter what I am doing. So basically what this shows is that for some reason, the values of these sensitivity sliders are just kind of like random. I don't know if there's a purpose. I don't know if they're random actually, but they don't make any logical sense to me personally. I basically just wanted to show you this so that you know that each slider is not really related to the other ones. They're just really weird in how they work. And that's if you wanted them all the same, that is how they would kind of have to look. And again, don't make them the same because now my sniper scope is super fast sensitivity. Like it'd be awful if I was actually using that. And the reason that it'd be awful if I was using that is because the traditional method for sensitivities is that the more you zoom in, the lower your sensitivity becomes. So you'd want a high sensitivity when you hip fire, and you'd want your sensitivity to be really low when you snipe, so you can be accurate at longer ranges. Okay, so now you basically understand how COD Mobile FOV and sensitivity works without the FOV sync setting on. Now let's go ahead and talk about when you do turn it on. Okay, so remember how I said that the camera FOV slider goes from 51-degree vertical field of view to a 90-degree vertical field of view? Now let's go ahead and set that slider at 90 and then ADS to see what happens. So as you can see, the FOV still does get a little bit more zoomed in, but compared to when the setting was off, it's not by much. The amount that you'll zoom is actually dependent on which type of optic you're using. Here's the data on that. So with shotguns, including the shorty, with their iron sights, it's a 95% FOV reduction. So for example, if you have 90 FOV as your camera FOV setting, and then you ADS with the shotgun, then your FOV would be reduced to 95%, which would be 85.5 degrees as your vertical FOV. Then after that, we have a very broad one. We have SMGs, ARs, LMGs, red dot, hollows, and secondaries. Again, except the shorty, and that is going to be 90% reduction. So if you had a 90 FOV, you'd now be down to 81. Then you have the tac scope at 66.67%. Then you have the 3x at 33.33%, which, I mean, these start to make a lot of sense because a 3x is going to be, you know, a third. So makes sense. So then the next one is 4x, which is 25%. So again, a fourth. It's 4x, makes sense. 4.4x, 22.73, 6x, 16.67, and then sniper is 20%. So again, if you're wondering what your vertical FOV is when you have this setting on, all you'd have to do is just take the type of weapon that you're using and then multiply its multiplier or multiply its percentage times whatever FOV you have for your camera FOV setting. So for example, if we're using the default sniper scope and we had 51 FOV, 51 times 0.2, comes out to 10.2 degrees FOV. And by the way, for comparison, the default sniper scope is 8.2 degrees. So you're actually still not as zoomed in as you would be with the setting just off and scoping in normal with the sniper. So now you understand what your FOV is with the sync FOV setting, but how does this affect your gameplay? The thing that matters the most. Obviously, your FOV is way wider when you're ADS when you have this setting on. Here's actually a side-by-side list for all the types of scopes so that you can see exactly what the FOVs would be compared to if you had the setting off. And as you can see, once again, even if you're at 51 FOV, it is always going to be a wider field of view when you're ADS than if you had the setting off and you were using the scopes just, you know, normally. So obviously you're going to have a wider FOV, but that comes with some pros and cons and also some misconceptions, some very popular misconceptions that people keep spreading. So let's go ahead and start with those. I want to talk about the misconceptions and kind of clear the air on those a little bit. The biggest two are around your recoil and your aim assist. For aim assist, I actually recorded a nice little explanation video earlier, so I'll go ahead and play that right now. All right, let me show you why aim assist feels stronger when you have FOV sync on. So first, I'm going to show you two screenshots. I want to see if you guys can tell the difference. So here's screenshot 1, here's screenshot 2. Now, basically they look the exact same, right? And especially from the perspective of what you'd be seeing when you play the game. Obviously, when you play, you see all of this. The first screenshot essentially is, this is with no FOV sync on. This is what you'd normally see when you ADS with the DRH, right? The second screenshot is me getting closer to the target and having a wider FOV because I have FOV sync on. So now let's go ahead and look at this from a top-down view to understand what's going on and why this matters with aim assist. So basically here we have the exact same thing. We have the target and we have the fence behind him. I'm using the fence so that I can measure some stuff here. Now we go ahead and we put our close person. This was us standing close and this was us standing further back. Now let's go ahead and look at the FOV. So if I go ahead and look at close range, basically what's happening here is we have our FOV. This is the gray. This is what we're seeing. So if you look at this screenshot here down, again, we have close range with 90 FOV sync. This is what you're seeing. That's your FOV. And the red line is basically your aim assist. So the way that I did this is in this screenshot, or in this screenshot of a video, I had this guy move back and forth. And basically I measured where my aim assist would kick in and where it would stop, where it would start and stop actually working. So it was, he started here and it worked. And then he went here and it kept working. And then as soon as he went here, it stopped. You know what I mean? And the way that we can measure this is, again, I measured the fence post behind him to see where it started and stopped. And it was 3.5 fence posts. So I put this line here to kind of show that off. So, you know, we have a quarter, 1 1/4, 2 1/4, 3 1/4, 3.5. 3.5 fence posts wide of aim assist, which comes out to 29.5 degrees of aim assist. So, you know, if this was you and you were looking on this line right here, you would rotate 29.5 degrees to get to this point right here where your aim assist would stop working, essentially. I did the exact same test, but backed up. I had him move back and forth, and I still got 3.5 fence posts. So again, up here, your aim assist started here, stopped here, 3.5 fence posts. But now, because you're further back, this is only 19 degrees to rotate from this point. So to rotate from this point to this point is only 19 degrees. So this is not, it's less aim assist, kind of. It feels like it's less aim assist because it's 19 degrees. To have the target be the same size as, you know, what you're used to, you have to get closer to them. And when you get closer to somebody, your aim assist feels stronger. It's the same reason why when you're like, when you're shooting someone really close range, like they're about to melee you, and it feels like your aim assist is just like crazy high. It's the exact same concept. This is why aim assist feels stronger. Just because you have to get closer to make the target the same size. Okay, so now you get aim assist, and recoil is actually kind of the same concepts, but a little bit different. So when you actually shoot your gun, it has aim shake, like it'll shake around and all that, but the gun doesn't actually have recoil. You don't see your gun going up. What you see is you see your camera perspective, you know, your surroundings, you see that going up. Or rather, you see your surroundings going down because your camera is going up. So this plus making the gun shake a little bit gives the illusion of recoil. So let's go ahead and break down these two things, aim shake and camera recoil. Okay, so for recoil, first let me start by saying that FOV sync, on or off, your recoil will be exactly the same. This setting does not affect your recoil. If you shoot a target that is 20 meters away and you don't control the recoil, you just let it go up, and then you go ahead and afterwards turn the setting on and then do the exact same thing, your recoil will end in the exact same spot. So the best way I can show why that the recoil feels reduced is because, as I just showed, if I shoot this AK, it's going to go up to the number 9. You can't see it super well because we have FOV sync on, but just think about it this way, right? So you know that the recoil is going to go from here to the number 9. That's how much screen space it needs to travel to get up there with FOV sync on. Now, if I were to take FOV sync off and we're going to like what we normally do, that's how much screen space my gun is going to travel. So you can see the recoil, it's the exact same amount of recoil, but it looks like it's going to be way less with FOV sync on because it has to travel less because of the FOV difference. But again, exact same amount of actual recoil, just it's perceived to be less. Next up is going to be aim shake. Now for aim shake, it is related to your gun, not your player camera. So even when you change to sync FOV, your aim shake will stay the exact same, which means as your target shrinks from a wider FOV, your aim shake will stay the exact same. So for example, at 20 meters away, you can see how aim shake covers the target worse with a wider FOV. So if I don't have FOV sync on, every time my reticle jumps, you can see it only jumps about 8 inches or 20 centimeters on the target's body, whereas it's jumping like 24 inches or 61 centimeters on the target with the FOV sync on. And you can really see this when I make the targets the same size. You can see how much this actually makes a difference. Now, I believe that aim shake is only a visual thing, so it's not actually affecting where your bullets go, but the wider FOV does make targets smaller, and so the aim shake animation becomes more intrusive when you're trying to aim, because again, it's starting to cover the target because target got smaller, but your gun is still the same size and it's still shaking just as much as it always has. So now you guys know how it works. Let's go ahead and talk about the pros and cons of it. The first pro is the most obvious one, and that is that you have more visibility when you're ADSing, so you have also more spatial awareness. But by getting more visibility on your sides and more spatial awareness, you're sacrificing a smaller primary target, which means now it's harder to identify or track or aim at the main thing that you're trying to aim at. And this is especially true for people on smaller phones, because it's already hard to see your target on a phone this big. But now, if you're zooming out and they just got, half as big, the target, it's, much harder. The next pro is that you are getting reduced perceived recoil, which can improve the feeling of aiming. And obviously, if you feel like you're aiming better, you're probably going to start aiming better because it's just the confidence thing. So I do think there's a level of that is important to talk about. Just by having your recoil feel lower, you're going to probably play a little bit better. Even though it's not actually better, it'll feel better. But then a con is that you have increased aim shake, which can be a problem really depending on which weapon you're using and how bad your iron sights are. If you're using a red dot and there's not a lot of aim shake, then it's really not a problem. The next pro is that the setting actually synchronizes the FOV of most iron sights and the red dot. So no matter what iron sight you're using, or if you're using a red dot, the FOV will pretty much always be exactly the same, which can develop a lot of consistency with your aim. Although, again, the differences between the field of views between the different reticles is not that big of a difference, so I don't think it affects your aim that much. So I don't think that pro is that big, but it was worth mentioning. But the con is that by changing this setting, you're going to have drastically different sensitivities, which will really mess with your muscle memory. And speaking of which, I also made a calculator to where you can put your sensitivities in, and then it'll spit out the sensitivities that you would need to have the perfectly lined up sensitivities for when this setting is on. Although granted, this will make your sensitivities a lot higher because you're zooming out so much that your sensitivities have to go way up to match the scaling, the focal length scaling. So I also added on this calculator a option where you can reduce all of the sensitivities by a certain percent. So if you do try the sensitivities and they feel way too high, you can go ahead and type in 90% in that, or 80% or whatever it is, and it will reduce it. When it actually comes to your sensitivities, I would recommend putting this setting on if you're going to try it, and then playing with your normal sensitivities. And if it does feel too low, like if you're noticing you're under aiming all the time, then what I would do is I would try the sensitivity calculator that I'm providing down below, and then try those sensitivities. And if that feels way too high, maybe try to find somewhere in the middle. Because the thing is, your default sensitivities will make it so that it's really hard to flick onto people. But then the sensitivities from the calculator will be a little too high for you to be accurate. So maybe in the middle is the best place to be, because it's just different sensitivity philosophies. We could get into it in a whole separate video, but I would recommend trying maybe, again, normal and then the calculator one, and then find somewhere in between that works. The important thing though is that when you find something that's close enough, you got to stick with it and build muscle memory with it. If you're always changing things up, you're never going to develop that accurate aim, because you're never committing to a sensitivity that you can build muscle memory around. I'll also include a link down below on how to use the calculator. I'm not going to include it in this video because it would make this video too long. But if you are wondering how to use the calculator, link below. And then the final pro is that it looks cool on camera. I mean, that's one of the biggest ones for most people, to be honest, or at least most content creators that I've seen using it, is it looks cool. So here is my final advice on this. At this point, hopefully you've watched the whole video and you know everything that I know. But I would say that this is only really practical for people that play a ultra aggressive playstyle and need that extra vision, because really the only upside again is that extra vision that you have while ADSing. So if you're a very aggressive OBJ player, I think it can be practical for that. If you do find a lot of benefit from the lower recoil, like if it actually makes you aim better just from having lower recoil, which again, it's not, but it can change how it's a placebo effect essentially. Or if you're a tablet player who plays somewhat aggressive and you can afford to have a little bit less zoom with your weapons because you have such a big screen, I think that can make sense. I think if you're a sniper, it actually can be really interesting. I did try it sniping specifically in S&D, and I really enjoyed it. Like, it was really fun to scope in at people and be able to see so much. But then when people were like, pretty far away, like 40, 50 meters away, they were teeny, and I couldn't zoom in anymore because I'm zoomed in as much as I could. So I had to really slow down and get my aim accurate. So if you're an S&D sniper, I wouldn't say do it, but if you're a respawn sniper who's always quick scoping, I think it could be a really good idea for you. So that is going to be it about FOV sync. That is everything we know about it, everything you need to know about it. I don't think there's anything else that I could have covered. Spent a lot of time just testing all this stuff. If it does help out, or if this video helped you out, definitely let me know down below by liking and commenting on the video. Also subscribing if you want to see more COD Mobile content. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you later. Peace.